Hey guys, hey, today we're not going to paint anything. All right, I'm going to cover where I get my blanks. Now, we're going to go a little more in depth to it. I get asked that. Probably the biggest question all is, where do you get your blanks? And I've left it in comments, and I've even done a couple videos. But this time around, we're going to talk about specific blanks, why I get them from specific locations. Sometimes you can take a blank and it's available 5, 6, 7 different places. But I get mine from one spot. Well, why do I do that? So that's kind of what we're going to cover, where I get the stuff and why I get it, where I get it. The first two places, and there will be links for everything down in the description. The first two, I would say, are from catalog areas, and that is Barlow's, and the other, I just happened to get the catalog a few weeks ago, Lure Parts Online. I've purchased blanks from both of these locations. They've been perfectly fine. They've done well. I will say I do more from Lure Parts Online than I have from Barlow's, but mainly that's because I buy some blanks there, but I buy my eyes from Lure Parts Online. They have some really nice eyes at a decent price. I buy jigs, I buy skirts, I buy hooks, I buy split rings, I buy chatterbait blades. A lot of the stuff that I'm putting together, I'm buying almost all of that from Lure Parts Online. So I do a lot more with them than I have with Barlow's, but both of those do carry your lures. Here in the U.S., places to get blanks. Predator bass bait and dingers. Predator bass bait and dingers are two that I've worked with. We'll get into it a little bit later why sometimes I specifically go with them than somewhere else. Those two have good quality lures, and again, we'll put the links in the description. Then I go to, and I got to get the name here. I was mentioned one day where I get them, and I had one of you tell me they got their lures from this place, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. It is Lianyungang Fine Fishing Tackle. All right, I'm assuming China, but it was picked up through Amazon. I believe picked up through Amazon. And I have ordered some from these, and the ones I got were good quality. So a link will be in the description for this. It'll be under Amazon because that's where they came through. And I'd have to say I'm happy with those. Now, that being said, Amazon itself, I've gone out and bought some other stuff on Amazon, and I didn't like it. And I'll explain to you a little bit later why I didn't like it. My last one, Shelts. Shelts is one I probably do most of my lures through. They're in China. Shelts had their own site. They've kind of moved a couple years ago under the umbrella of AliExpress. Now, AliExpress is probably hundreds or thousands of stores that all get under one big umbrella, and Ali kind of handles all the financial stuff for all of them, which really turns out to be good. Because if you have a problem and you get some little fly-by-night store in China you're having a problem with, Ali doesn't mess around. I had one I had a problem with on some rubber frogs, and they were messing around and giving me a bad time. Got into Ali, they said, no problem, we take care of it, have your money back. And actually within 24 hours, I had the money back in my account already. So Shelts goes under the umbrella of AliExpress. I'll put a link to Shelts store so you can go to that one too. Now, why do I get stuff in certain locations? Why do I buy some from Shelts? Why do I buy some from Predator or Dinger? Let's start there, and we're going to start with Amazon. All right, here's my purchase from Amazon. DT6. Man, they look good. They didn't cost much. Bought them from Amazon, and they were squat. You'll see me paint them from time to time, but I'll guarantee you'll see me paint it, and then I throw it over on the counter, and I never fish it. I bought these, painted some, took them in, and sometimes you have to true up a lure. It may want to go to the left, it may go to the right, but it's really bad, it floats up on its side. So I started this, I had one, I was trying to work with it. I had another one painted, I gave one to a guy that fishes more than me, tournament fishes, everything else. And I said, you're going to have to true it out. Now I'm having a heck of a time getting mine. I have one that sort of runs true, every once in a while. The other two I've tried, I could never get them to run true no matter what I did. I asked him, he couldn't get his to run true either. There was my purchase from a place in Amazon I did not know, and I got a bunch of lousy lures. Which brings me to places like predator bass bait or dingers. They will handle, here's a DT6 that I got from them. Now, maybe this one's all smooth, so it's not all got all the scales and everything in it. But you know what? When you buy something from predator bass bait or dinger, they test them. They're going to get in a whole bunch of these. They're going to test them, and they're going to be, I haven't yet to one that did not run true when I bought one from them. So, yes, I'm spending a lot more money for this blank than I spent for this blank, but I can actually use it, and it runs true. The other nice thing about those two, sometimes they'll have lures you won't find someplace else. Here's the DT6 I mentioned. Now, here is a DT10 Body, but it's a DT16 bill. So DT10 Body should go 10 foot deep. DT16 bill's designed to go 16 foot, so I don't know exactly how deep it goes. But I'll tell you what, you put this on and run it down in there, you can feel this thing just pounding down in there. And I've caught fish with it. We've caught some fish. I let Bob use it one day, and he caught some fish with it too. The key is, a deep diver like this runs true every time. Didn't have a problem with it. So if you're going to be buying deeper divers, and 6 foot I know is not a lot. And let's face it, in Nebraska, my lakes are 20-some foot deep. So if I'm buying a 14, 15 foot deep diver, that's deep for me. And I know some of you are fishing lakes 50 foot deep. I don't have that. But my position is, if you're going to buy a deep diver, something that's going to go deeper, that's the day I go to dingers. That's the day I go to predator bass bait, somewhere where I know they've tested these lures and make sure they work first. Otherwise, I think you're wasting your money. Now, I'm throwing some topwater stuff, some little plugs or spooks or stuff like that. Or maybe even it's a cheap jerkbait. All that's got to do is lay on the surface. It doesn't have to do anything fancy. Who cares? You know, it doesn't matter to me much on that one. I can buy that anywhere else. I can buy it cheap. As long as it lays on the surface, as long as it doesn't have a hole in it and fills up with water, it'll probably work. But when I'm doing stuff like this, I'm not going cheap over there. Not with this stuff, because these things are notorious for not running true. So spend the money. Which brings me back to Lure Parts Online. I have this one I buy from Lure Parts Online. This is a deep diver, probably, again, 8, 10, 12 feet, something like that. I can't even remember exactly. But the key I liked about it, this is a Man's blank from the Man Lure Company. This is not a knockoff. All right, but everything else you see here, they're all knockoffs. The plastic stuff you're buying these blanks here and there around, this is, you know, when you're buying this is not a true DT6, the exact same body. It's a knockoff body. That's the way that works. This was a true Man's blank. All right, this is their true lure, because I've talked to the people at Man's and I've talked to Lure Parts Online both. That's their true blank. So that's where I went to Lure Parts here. I wanted that Man's blank. Again, something deeper. Now, the other thing you can do, such as when we're talking dinger or predator bass bait, is something, as I mentioned, you don't get anywhere else, and that is the Scrank style in a holographic. They had it in a holographic. Now in the 1.5, they had the smaller 1.2, smaller version of the Scrank. And I got some of those, and to be honest, I can't remember if it was dinger or predator bass bait, but either one of those will handle some of these little bit different lures you won't find somewhere else. While we're talking them, and while we're talking the other, let's go back to my jerkbait. This is a cheap jerkbait. I'm not sure where I got them. They could have came from Shelts. They could have came wherever they came from. But it's just a cheap holographic jerkbait. Floats, nothing fancy. Now, let's say I want one that suspends. I want to get a suspending jerkbait, and I want to get a little more technical than this, and I want something that's going to suspend here, or slow sink, or this or that, that's not the time to buy cheap. That's the time to go back to Dinger or go back to predator bass baits and start looking at places like that. Because I'll tell you what, a suspending jerkbait, it can get down to what size split ring and hook are you using, whether that suspends properly or not. There is no way you're going to go buy a bunch of cheap jerkbaits and they're going to suspend properly for you. Ain't going to happen. I even tried putting some weights on mine. I did a video. I tried making mine suspend. It's okay, but you know what? I'm going to go to Dinger, or I'm going to go to somebody good. If I want a suspending jerkbait, I'm going to go buy one there. I'll spend more money for it, but I'm going to get what I want, and what I'm going to get is probably going to work. So if you're just looking for a plain old flat floating jerkbait, probably get them all anywhere. I've done these. I caught a lot of fish with them. Don't get me wrong, but they still work. They still catch great fish. But if you want something that suspends and get a little bit more technical in a jerkbait, don't go cheap. Now start looking for something better. Here I got lucky. Now these are your flicker shad wrap, and here's where you're going to be too. And if you're painting for somebody else, I use the flicker shad number blah, or I use the shad wrap number. So can you match that? You know what? No, you're not. They're knockoffs. This is not quite a. This one of them has a bill similar to a flicker shad, but the body's similar to a shad wrap. And the other one's got a body similar to a shad wrap, but the bills, they're not the same. There's something in the middle. They're not really a flicker shad. They're not really a shad wrap. In this situation, and I wish I remembered where I bought them. I bought them on the cheap because I think I bought about 40 of these things. And they might have been through Amazon. It might have got my luck. These work great. Even though they're going to go down there, these will run down there 7 or 8 feet deep. The only reason I know this works good is last year I trolled down the lake with them, and I trolled over a hump that was about 8 foot deep, and I was hitting the hump every time I came by using these. So I know they were going down at least 8 foot deep, which surprisingly they ran good and true and straight. I haven't had a problem with any of them. So I got lucky there, but normally I would say if you're going to get into this shad wrap, flicker shad style, try a few. You know, if they're cheap enough, try 10. See if they actually really work well. If they do, remember where you got them so you can go back to the same place and get more. If they don't, you better start looking at that better quality lure again. You're going to spend more money, but at least it's going to run right. And the other thing you're going to get into is, are you putting on the 2-piece top coat like I do, that epoxy coat? It's going to change weights and everything. So where a guy is saying, hey, I'm using this flicker shad, blah, blah, this lure, and it's going to go down just so many feet if I put it so far behind the boat and I got this speed and I'm using this weight line, you're never going to know that. Because you have a knockoff lure and you're not painting it the same way. You're putting a heavy 2-piece top coat. It's going to change everything compared to the standard everything you're buying. So keep that in mind. That's going to bring me to Shelts. All right, Shelts is where I buy the majority. I mean, I've got a lot of the odds and ends here, but my most used all the time, the S-Crank. You see me use the S-Crank a lot. I get it from Shelts. I can buy it at Dinger's. I can buy it through the catalogs, through there. Predator bass baits. You got a Dinger. It's never the original. All right, Mega Bass S-Crank. Go look in the store. They're like 19 bucks a pop. All right, at least they were the last time I looked. That was a year or two ago. These are knockoffs. They're always going to be a knockoff, and there's some really lousy knockoffs. I started buying the S-Crank from Shelts, I don't know, a few years ago. I love them. I've never had a bad one. This replaces my 2.5. This is going to go down about 5 foot deep. I don't even use a 2.5 anymore. I use an S-Crank. And that's probably wrong. I should probably go back and buy some 2.5s and use them. I just love the S-Crank. I use it a ton. And I know it's good coming from Shelts. Now, I want it with a holographic. I'm not going to get it from Shelts. I got to go to Dinger or Predator Bass Bait or somebody like that that carries that. Shelts doesn't carry the small 1.2. These guys did that. So I'm buying some from them. Usually here, this is what I'm going to do with Shelts. The other one I like, I started right way on early with this one. And this is your Spro's Little John. Smooth side, flat side. Going to run about 7-8 foot deep, roughly. And I started doing this one from Shelts way back because it was a knockoff of the Spro's, which I knew the Spro's Little John was a good lure. Have had great success with this, never had a problem with this, never had a bad lure. So I make sure other people handle it, but when it comes down to the S-Crank or the Spro's Little John, I'm going to Shelts every time because I've always had good luck with them. So that's where I'm going to keep going back. I've also done my 1.5s from Shelts. No problems there. The 1.5's always been good. I have gone, I believe it was Lure Parts Online, had a blank, called the laser eye. It's got a special eye, because remember that you buy the blanks, then you had to go buy the eyes separate. But it had a special eye on it. I bought some to try them. I like them. They work. I've caught fish. But the body style is basically a 1.5. So it's really still just a 1.5. But it was something different eyes. And I figured I'm painting something different for you guys too. And the last thing from Shelts, I love a wake bait. I really got into wake bait fishing a few years ago. Nice, simple, easy. Never had a problem with these. So basically, that's where I'm always going to go. I'm going to Shelts for my wake baits. And that's where I'll do my main lures. The main thing, I'm doing a lot of S-Cranks. I will do a lot of Spro's Little John, 1.5s, and wake baits. So I'm headed to Shelts for those. I trust them, and I know what I've had good. Sometimes I'll head out for something odd. Jerk baits, I'm not too picky there because I really don't care if they're going to be a float. Oh, what's a floater? I don't need a suspender or anything like that. And I may try popper somewhere and find something different here or there. I also have my deep divers and my stuff I know I want to go to the good places for. But that's how I decide where I'm going to buy my lures. If I'm doing something that's going to go deep, I'm going somewhere good. I'm not going to buy cheap because I'm going somewhere good. I may not buy 10 of them, but I want to know they're going to run true, they're going to run deep, and they're not going to lay on their side when I'm reeling them in. And guess what? That's what that one did. That was terrible. So that's what I'm doing. I have links for every place down there. You find that all in the description. Depending what you're buying, kind of depends where you should want to go. I really do believe that. I buy a little bit of stuff from everybody. As I said, Shelts is going to get the majority of my business because they're not very high priced, and I've never had a bad lure from them. And I don't know how many hundreds of lures I've purchased from Shelts. I've never had a bad one. Shelts is in China. Got a problem buying from China? Well, then you're probably going to have to go somewhere else here in the States, but just so you know, they're buying that from China, and then they're marking it up and selling it to you here. So you're still buying from China. I think if you want, I don't know of anybody in the States, and I'm not saying there isn't, but I don't know of anybody in the States that's making plastic lures like this, knockoffs of these, and are doing it here in the States. I think everything's done overseas, and it's brought in, at least as far as I know that's the case. So, but that's where you go. I mean, I think there's a cheap route to go. I think some of these lures, you can go the cheap route if all they got to do is lay flat in the water. If all they got to do is float and don't fill up with water with a hole in them, I think you can go pretty cheap. But there's lures such as this that you're going to spend more money for, but I think it's worth the effort to make sure they run. And then some novelty stuff, something like that, you're probably going to have to spend a little more money for it, but I don't do a ton of those, so I don't mind spending a little more money for something like that. I hope that answers your questions of where do I get my blanks and why do I get my blanks, where I get them. At least, hopefully I explained it all for you. Next week, we'll get back and get something painted again. Thanks for sticking with me.